he can be transformed. And one of Australia's, one of Ballarat's great educational exports, if you like, and I mention his name tonight because we have General Peter Cosgrove here, and that is Pompey Elliott. Pompey Elliott, a remarkable man. I have a passion for many things in life, but one of them, and one of my bucket lists, I was determined that I would travel the battlefields of northern France, the World War I battlefields. So in September, I stood and wept on no man's land in Fromelles, Villers-Bretonneux, Polygon Wood, Ypres, you name it, I was there. And that is exactly where Pompey Elliott stood and led men with extraordinary bravery, but at sometimes following what can only be described as fairly foolish directions from his superior. But he stuck at it and he led his men. And on May the 7th, 2011, our guest tonight, General Peter Cosgrove, unveiled the statue to Pompey Elliott that's in the centre of Ballarat as a permanent reminder of the fact that he was a Ballarat College graduate, that he went to university, and that education was something, and the values he learnt from education was extraordinary. General Peter Cosgrove is an extraordinary man. I've had the pleasure in the last couple of years with Peter as Chancellor to get to know a little bit more of Peter than perhaps some others have. Some things strike me about Peter. He is down to earth, he is honest, he is friendly, and what he says you can believe in. That, I think, indicates his extraordinary leadership qualities. And with that is the greatest doses of humility I have ever seen. One would never know Peter standing in the Australian community and think also of him being humble. But this afternoon, just as a small sample, at 5:30 we needed to bring some chairs in here. Who helped carry the chairs in from outside to here? Adele was having a heart attack that the guest speaker tonight would actually be rearranging the furniture. But that is just a small example of the sort of person that Peter is, a great Australian, someone who's dedicated and able. And just a light story about his dedication before I welcome him to the stage. Peter dedicates himself to everything he does. And you may notice at different times an ad on TV for Victoria Bitter, raise a glass to the diggers. I'm reliably told that Peter was so dedicated to that he was happy to have 10 or 15 shots a day so that he could get the cold glass of VB and have half a glass of it and really enjoyed it. I don't need to read out Peter's CV, it's in the book. I don't think there's anybody more known to most Australians than Peter, so it's a great honour. General Peter Cosgrove, guest of honour tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, mate. Hello.
Hello, Peter.
How are you?
Welcome to the stage, Peter. And thank you for joining us this evening. As I said before, it's a great night for Ballarat, I think, when we've got our leadership group here, but also you here to be able to share some of your stories. And as Joe said, your CV's in the pamphlet on the table, but we can actually do a Google search on the internet and find out about, your military profile. Tonight it's about the man behind the scenes, and we hope that we can share part of your journey with you, Peter, over the next hour or so. So let's start in the 60s, a young officer graduating out of Duntroon and 22 years of age. And before you know it, you're in charge of the 5 Platoon B Company in Vietnam. What's it like to lead men into their first battle?
It's actually objectively pretty terrifying thought, because the boys who I took over had been there for 6 months and they'd already been in combat a number of different times. So they would have to be hard markers, because they would all be thinking, well, we know what we're doing. Does this guy know what he's doing? And is he going to get us killed? It's different if you all start at the same level. You're all new people into the war, and you haven't had battle experience before. Then you find out with each other. In this case, it was particularly fraught because they'd not only had a number of previous episodes of combat, but they'd done very well.
So that's interesting because you had graduated as an officer. Yeah. You were serving there with the long-term soldiers, as you've just said, and you were there at the time of the decision-making, saying this is how we're going to do it. Yeah. How did you manage those relationships?
Well, the responsibility is inescapable. You can't sort of go to sleep and not do anything. You can't absent yourself. You're expected to attend to your duty every day. And I found that while I liked all these guys, liked them, and they were salt of the earth people, and you felt like you were actually an extra in a Chips Rafferty movie about diggers, because they all were the prototype with nicknames and bad behaviour and swearing and enormous generosity, great good humour and gallantry and all that sort of thing. And there you are, and you're a live performer. So part of the performance for me was to be a little bit reserved, which was not my nature. I'm a very gregarious, exuberant person. More so as I got older, because as you get more confident, you can let perhaps all that sort of thing express a bit more. But I had to be a little bit, not aloof, but reserved. And the first few episodes of action, I did my job. Not perfectly, but I was up to their expectations. And after that, there was this sort of invisible tick given to me. Tick, you'll do. And from that point, it was not smooth sailing, but I'd been accepted that I wouldn't get them killed by being either cowardly or overly rash. Either of those will really be bad.
Well, you earned their respect along the way, and obviously you respected them in their roles as well as part of that process.
They get the glory now because they all think it's pretty cool that I got to be the Chief of the Defence Force. Yeah. And whenever I see them, they say, "We trained you." Which is true.
Well, you obviously did a great job, and your leadership at the time earned you a military cross. But unfortunately, it came at a cost of lives.
Sure.
So how do you carry that burden, and do you fall back on your Catholic faith as part of that process?
I'm not sure. You fall back on faith amongst other things because we've all got a moral grounding, and we get it from some of us who are Christians get it from whatever our faith is. Some of other religions get it from that religion. Even folks who don't believe would look back on the family values, which I think are fundamental, and that's their moral grounding. So I remember the first time we ever got into a battle that I was involved in, and straight afterwards I'm standing next to some fellows from the other side that we'd killed and making radio calls, because you've got a lot of reporting and call for support and all that sort of thing. And these poor chaps were there, and I'm just doing the job of an infantry platoon commander that I've been trained to do for 4 years at Duntroon, and in the intense period of getting my head round what actually happened in Vietnam. So, and then here it was happening for real. I'm on the radio, I'm talking to my boss somewhere, and it suddenly struck me, these poor guys aren't going home to mum and the kids. This is the enemy. And I thought, somewhere there's a very bereaved set of families. So in some ways later on I thought, well, was that a bit of a wussy thing to do? And I thought, no, I hope I always think that way. Always. And take no joy in the death of these men. I could only wish that, we hadn't had to have the fight, but there we are. And of course, when our guys died, it's terrible because these are people that you are particularly responsible for. I was lucky I had nobody killed in Vietnam. I've always been lucky in that regard. Even when we were in Iraq, and I was reporting to the Cabinet before the commitment to Iraq, they wanted to know how many Aussies would be killed in this war. Well, in fact, I said, you have to know what we estimate will be the casualties of our commitment in Iraq. And I won't tell you the number but it was a large number. You work it out like an actuary would work out something for an insurance thing. You apply a formula. And we did that. Applied the formula and reported to the government. And this large number, you could see their eyes standing out like this. And they need to know, politicians need to know that this is real people, both sides, our people and theirs, who are going to be dead as a result of this. And it was miraculous. We didn't lose anybody. And we had fights. Our special forces in the desert had the boxing gloves on quite frequently with Saddam's special forces. And we were just enormously lucky.
So, Peter, you draw on your time at Duntroon as through all of that. So, do you think a person's born a leader, or can a leader be made?
Very much the latter, because everybody is capable of leadership. I suppose the more complex and sophisticated levels of leadership, you'd like to think you've got professional help in nurturing the parts of your makeup that go to that. But everybody's a leader. I mean, the guy who, here in Ballarat, at the kids' soccer field, is putting out the witches' hats on a winter's morning. It's old Bill gets down there, does it every time, and the other dads arrive up, and they all jump out. They say, oh, and they start helping. He's leading. The lady who opens up the tuck shop. Why is it always ladies' tuck shop, blokes on witches' hats? I don't know. Because the ladies don't poison people, I suppose. But
well, the Committee for Ballarat have a strong investment in leaders in the region. We believe that it's critically important as our investment in the program. Let's jump now to 99. Prime Minister John Howard chose you to lead the military operation in Timor. It was a brilliant operation, fast, effective and successful, but it was dependent on the troops holding their nerve. No trigger-nervous young soldier boxing at shadows. It involved the Air Force, the Navy and the Army. How did you keep control of all of those disciplines at the same time so that you didn't have that one-off incident that could have blown out of control?
You obviously put yourself about amongst the troops, but of the three services. But in particular, I worked constantly with the seniors from those services, Navy, Army and Air Force, to make sure they understood how crucial it was that we maintained what I might call a totally belligerent, no-nonsense, highly professional demeanour. But behind that, we were looking to finesse the operation. We had somewhere between 15 and 20,000 Indonesian soldiers in East Timor who had to leave. They had to pack up and leave, and they were unhappy because from their point of view, they'd invested blood and sweat and treasure in East Timor over 25 years, and this was an act from their point of view of treachery by the East Timorese and bastardry by the international community to sort of give them the heave-ho. Very resentful. So these highly emotional Indonesian troops are passing through Dili, the capital, while I'm bringing in troops left, right and centre, and the potential for the boxing gloves to come on was really high. And almost did a few times, but our soldiers were great. And I have to take my hat off to the Indonesian general too. He's written a book about it, a book about his life, but it includes a big section on East Timor. And he is enormously admiring of the discipline of our soldiers. They were fantastic. At a time when only 1 in 10 of them would have had any operation, probably 1 in 20 or 50 would have had any operational service. They were all warrant officers down to young diggers, were people who'd never seen a shot fired in anger, but they'd been training forever.
I had the pleasure when I was preparing for these questions to be approached by a Ballarat man. I think that you are aware of his father, young Murray Foster was the one who spoke to me. His dad was your RSM at Duntroon, and there's a personal letter that he handed to me, a handwritten letter from you to a good friend and mentor as in Brian Foster during the early stages of the East Timor conflict. Do you mind if I share that this evening?
Sure.
Okay. This is the letter that Peter Cosgrove penned to a friend and mentor who had been part of that, once again, that Duntroon experience. Well, two of them, two RSMs actually. Dear Brian and Tom, what a great thrill to get a letter from two of the Army's most famous reprobats and warriors. Not to say two men most influential in my military education. My very best wishes to you both. To see our young soldiers stepping into the shoes of their illustrious predecessors would make you very proud indeed. I'm proud and exceedingly humble indeed to be their boss. In this regard, I am like a monkey riding the elephant in the circus. I only think I'm in charge. In the first few weeks, the diggers really had to rely on teamwork, guts and instinct, as the pressures, sights and sounds and the odd stash were overwhelming, like nothing they'd experienced before. But the training shone through and they kept their heads and didn't flinch. The other guy did, and from that point on we've been riding hands and heels. The diggers are now confident and bushwise. They're also like a bull terrier on a leash. You have to hang on to them. The infantry battalions of the SASR are magnificent. All other forces, Indonesians and allies, know they are very formidable. Really though, from my lofty and precarious perch, I tell you both, they are, all of them, Navy, Army, Air Force, magnificent, unbeatable, the best there is. We can all rest easy. You must be very proud of each and every one of them that have served underneath you.
Yeah, well, there's a great community of them, and I was very cunning. I got 2 medals for the group that went there. One was a standard medal like some of these guys here have got, some of the fellows from 87 RBR, but we got a special medal cut which was Interfet. Now I did that deliberately so for the rest of my time when I'd see some fellow wearing that medal, I'd say, oh yeah, you were with me in East Timor, weren't you? So there was method in my madness.
Yeah.
It's led to medal creep. Everybody gets 2 medals these days.
Our son Aaron was on HMAS Anzac in the port of Dili at that time.
Yes.
And as a parent, you had our son's life in your hands to a certain extent, and all we could do was pray that he would come home. But you were touched because I understand your son Philip was injured in Iraq. How did you break the news to your wife, and how did you deal with the situation as a family?
Well, it was interesting because you're in a privileged position as CDF. You get all the operational information, so if anything happens of a notable importance, your phone's going to ring, and you will know before, certainly before the media, before anybody else, basically. But because of that privileged position and the fact that there were hundreds and hundreds of Aussies there whose mums and dads were not in the same position, I said to the people in the system, never make special reporting on my son. Just tell me what you would ordinarily tell me, not anything special. And I had to say that because, you know, otherwise it would look like it was a system monitoring just my boy. He was an infantry soldier helping guard the embassy in Baghdad. And fortunately, all the junior officers I gave that instruction to nodded and then said, yeah, but we're going to tell you. So the phone would ring in the middle of the night. Now, I got a phone call in the middle of the night to say there's been a huge bomb go off in Baghdad, and it was an attack upon the area where the embassy guard is located, and it's a massive bomb. Lots of Iraqis killed, but none of the Australians were killed. And, oh, by the way, your son's fine. So I told my wife, this is sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, and not a lot of sleep for the rest of the night. And then I got a revised report to say, look, we said your son wasn't hurt, but he's actually been flash burnt by the explosion. Not too bad. He'll stay on duty. So anyway, the phone rings. We formed the thing where we had a small number of soldiers, but there was going to be an outlandish report. We actually used to get them on the phone to ring their loved ones. Each soldier would get 30 seconds to ring up mum or his wife or whatever and say, you're going to see something on TV, I'm okay. Right. Yeah. And that took the pressure off a bit. Philip rings me up because it's his turn. He says, oh, Dad, did you hear? I said, yes, I've heard, son. And he said, and I was, yes, I know, son. But I said, yeah, I know you're all right, son. He said, oh, you're no fun, you know.
Speaking of that then, information technology, it's changed the way reporting happens. It's instant now, there's high expectations. But there's also, on the other side, there's an opportunity for the soldiers to go on the internet or Skype and talk to home. John and the guys were away for 8 months at a time. Yeah. So the internet and IT, has it helped or is it a hindrance when you're in battle?
Yeah, I mean, it's got ups and downs. I mean, you can't disinvent technology, and the last thing I would want to do is to say, as a knee-jerk to the downside, that, oh, you can't have internet, mobile phones, what have you. There's a time and a place, and what you've got to do is train the soldiers to use it better. Look, the poor women we left behind when we went off to war, who were coping with family issues and going crazy trying to look after little kids and keep the home fires burning, didn't really, in the past, have time, a way to vent or to explain or to look for that strong partner's shoulder to cry on. And increasingly these days, it's not a woman at home, it's a bloke who's the other half dealing with things at home. But now with internet, Skype, mobile phones, you can have the chat. And some guys just staggered in out of a fighting patrol in Afghanistan and your wife's on the phone. The washing machine's on the blink and this kid's giving me the irrits, you know, and I just, you know, I'm ready to blow my brains out. Well, that sort of bit of stress transference is, you worry about that. Equally, you worry about the kid who comes straight back in off a fighting patrol where something's happened and he's just frothing at the mouth because his mate's dead. Why is my mate dead? It's got to be them, you know. So we've had a couple of those happen where kids have come back and vented straight onto social media or telephones or the like, and whooshka, it's front page news. And of course then there's a backlash on that because it turns out this young soldier doesn't have the full story and he's just venting. So you need to know that those diggers don't get chucked in jail or anything like that, but it's just destabilising on the whole team. So the thing is training. You know, don't sit down there straight after you've seen your mate blown apart and stick it onto social media, you know, because that might be therapeutic in a way, but it's better dealt with when you're cooler. And you even sort of try to reach out to the partners back in Australia and say, just think before you mention the fact that the car's been repossessed. Yeah. There's a wonderful story. Can I tell a story?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. 6 RAR was in East Timor, and they got handsome allowances we all got handsome allowances while we were away, and this lady comes out to meet her husband arriving back in Brisbane with a group of other soldiers, and they all had to go back to the barracks because they had their rifles and military equipment they needed to hand in before they went off on leave. But those whose loved ones actually came to the airport, well, the soldier could travel back to the barracks in the car, so they could chat in the car. Okay. And they're driving back, and there's some bus in front with all the other diggers, and this woman's got a secret. She said, you know how we've been getting all that extra money? Yes, yeah. Well, and you know how we've always wanted a swimming pool? Yeah. Well, we've got one. We've got a big in-ground pool that I use the extra money and it's all there ready for you. He said, but we're in a married quarter, we don't own it.
So
Anyway, the next tenants were very happy.
so that's on the light side. Soldiers have been away on difficult situations for 8 months, 12 months at a time. They've been trained to kill. They've trained and they've worked in a very difficult environment. They come home and they have to get to know their partner and their children all over again. And I've heard real stories of that being a difficult process. How good is the Army at that desensitising process?
I don't know empirically how good, but much better than it used to be. I mean, it's light years away from the way it was in World War I, World War II, any of the other 1950s and 60s wars, where you came home and it was just get on with it. Half the trauma and PTSD and what have you that's afflicted some of those, say, Vietnam folks is because the systems weren't there when they came home. It was just out you go and good luck. And when it first started to come in, I can tell you I was a Luddite. I looked at these systems and thought of if we start to become gentle, nurturing creatures with our soldiers who have to do enormously stressful things, we could end up with a situation where we have young officers and other leaders in combat sort of metaphorically feeling their psychological pulse and saying, oh no, I'm stressed out, I have to stop. And you would be saying, no, you've got to press on and finish. But that's not quite what we were looking to do, and it's not what we do, but we do de-stress people and assess them wonderfully more than we ever used to, and we do try to get early intervention because we figure, just like any other more physically observable ailment, that mental stresses can be repaired if you get to them more quickly, identify them more quickly. You won't get necessarily a profound casualty, but you might have somebody who can be brought back to a very good operating level. So I'm a convert, and I had been. I wasn't just after I left. I was a convert for the last 15 years of my service, and I even got a stress test myself before I left Timor. Now, I was sitting in an office and visiting the troops. Whatever stress I had wasn't the same stress as them. They could get shot, I could get fired or whatever, but I had a psychologist come into my office and do a sort of stress test on me before I left, and I said, what happens if I fail? Do I stay here? I didn't fail.
Major John Spencer just tells me after 8 months he gets home and he keeps his head down and shuts up and does what he's told. So I reckon that's probably a fairly good plan.
But there is a coping thing here. It's very normal for women and men who are in a deeply loving relationship to have friction when they get back because she's been running the place and the bloke walks in and he wants to take over again and be critical or, change systems, and the kids are confused. So there's a real, I was going to say a moment. It's not a moment. It's longer than a moment. There's a readjustment period for both. And women are always the shock absorbers in most families, and we're trying to reduce the shock for the woman and even to tell her what to expect so that the returning bloke, even though somebody's working with him to say, wake up yourself, that there will be some aggressive and assertive behaviour that you've got to be on the...
Manage. Yeah. Yep. This evening you heard about our Ballarat girl, Brigadier Simone Wilkie.
Oh, yes.
Yes, a direct descendant of our mayor.
The
Burt family, yes. She's one of the highest ranked women in the Australian Defence Force as we speak. I know that you hold her in high regard.
I do, yeah.
What do you think of the role of women in the Defence Forces, and are you supportive of them being on the front line?
Yeah. Well, they are already on the front line in Navy and Air Force, and they have been for some time. The Army held out, making the government really think carefully about this, on the matter of the women being in frontline combat in the Army, which is essentially close combat. what do I mean by close combat? I would rush at Joe with a knife, attempting to kill him, to grapple with him. And over here, the woman on my right would be doing the same with whoever was in front of her. And my fight might go okay, hers might not go too well, and she could be lying there desperately wounded, but I would then move on because the job wasn't finished. So that's the reality. And I always used to say to the politicians who used to sneak around on this one, there is no pedestal here. There's not the pedestal of close combat. There's a dirty, deep, dark ditch. And I worry about blokes being in it, and I worry about women being in it. That said, the sort of senior Australian sort of military politician in me says, I am prepared for women to take equal chances to die for their country as for men. So if it's the will of the country, will of the nation, that women should share those risks, then I will be into it 100% in their training. We will make those women the very best warriors we can, with all of the combat behaviours and all of the outcomes that have been confined to the men. So it's going to happen. And if I was young enough and still involved, I would be a very committed and full-on trainer of women to be in that area of close combat. I just want to stress though, you're going to get out of women a lot of different behaviours than previously military women have exhibited. When I was commandant of the Royal Military College, I got all the girls who were there at the college, and there's quite a few, and they're wonderful women. Simone was that. She'd been there as one of the bosses at the Royal Military College, but our time didn't overlap. And one of these issues was on about should women be the combat parts of the army. And I asked the women, they said no. Not us. It's not why we joined. There might be some women who would join for that. That's not why we joined up. So somebody suddenly said to us, you're in. We'd think, no, but I didn't want to do that. I understand enough about it to make an informed decision. I want to do something else. So it's something where, in the end, I'd hate it for society to say, let's do it, and we do it, and then they say, I don't like that. We have to change. That would be really bad. So we're in.
And a policy issue, I guess, you know, from that point of view. And so let's get into politics and the Australian Defence Force. John Howard appointed you head of the Australian Defence Force. You jumped over a number of other people that may have been in line. You have to deal with, you know, tight fiscal budget cuts to defence. How do you manage that role as the head of defence and the political influence?
Just to correct the record a little bit, we were rolling in money. That was when the GST first came in. The government hadn't discovered how wealthy it would be and what to do with it all. So 9/11 came along, so we wanted for nothing. I was spoilt. I had none of the financial pressures of my successors like Angus Houston and now David Hurley. I was spoilt for resources, but we did have 9/11. We did have Iraq, Afghanistan, you know, all kinds of things. So my relationship with the Pollies was very good. I found that my job was to give it to them straight. And I could understand the politics, and I told my fellow senior officers, don't be so buff-headed that you don't understand what the pressures are on these politicians to do X or Y or Z. You've got to know that, but don't let it affect the advice you give. Give the advice straight up and down. So I think that's pretty good advice, and that's the way I try to operate, that you're aware of the politics, you don't participate in it.
I agree with you there. I've been in that position myself in a different life. Joe's trying to wind me up.
Yeah, of course he will. He's paid to.
Yeah, but look, I had the opportunity as mayor, previous mayor, to go on Operation Boss Lift to the Solomon Islands.
Yep.
And I know that you've been in the Solomon Islands, East Timor, and I acknowledge John Spencer and Daniel here this evening, just come back from East Timor and the Solomon Islands. What advice would you give to the employers in the room tonight if they had a reservist as come forward and seeking a job at their company, knowing that they have the potential to be away for extended periods of time? What advice do you give to potential employers in the room?
Everybody always appeals to your better nature when they want you to do something which basically means that you have to put your hand in your pocket. And with an employee going off, you're not only putting your hand in your pocket, but you're losing a key employee. But my appeal would be you're serving Australia if you do it. It's up to the government and the military to help you to cope with that service that you provide. The only other thing I say, if you send away a champion, you'll get back an Olympic gold medal champion. That's what you'll get back. They will be bigger in all of their capabilities, better in the things they used to do, and very energetic. They are men, women, boys, girls, whoever they are. They'll all be more mature, much more useful to you in your company's operations when you get them back. So grit your teeth and do it for the Peter Costello said, one for mum, one for dad, and one for the nation. Righto. Well, I'm saying whatever you do in relation to the reserve here, are you helping Australia?
Thank you, Peter. I couldn't agree more. That outstanding group of people. I'm going to now ask if there's an opportunity for any questions from other folk. I've had a fairly good go at it. I've got a heap more that I'd love to do. But are there any questions in the room this evening that people would like to ask Peter before we wrap it up? Is there someone with their hand up? Adele? I can't see
There's
up
a gentleman
here.
there.
Yep. Doug, thank you.
Peter, thanks for being here and sharing some of your stories. There's been very recent press reports about things that the Defence Force needs to do to protect those people you've described as sort of heroes, unsung, many of them, from either accidental injury or misadventure in some form or another. Do you want to comment on that, or is that? I'd like to hear the real story on that, because it's potentially a media beat up, but you're in a position to tell a real story about that, I'm guessing.
Yeah, look, I think our returned men and women have been suffering seriously from what I might call a sense of isolation. They might be living in a tight family unit, but they're the only person in the family who's seen and done certain things and feeling the effect. So even in a very attentive family, you can feel isolated, I dare say. But in the past, that was not really recognised and treated. I think we're enlightened to the point where we do start to recognise that we can institute programs to help people. So I think the more we understand, the less stigma there's attached. There's maybe, I'm not sure, there's not too many people of the World War II vintage in here, but they were the...
Oh, I'm getting close.
Yeah, well, yeah. But you were sort of told, if I could use the vernacular, as a suck it up, just get on with it, don't be whinging sort of thing. And that meant you internalised all this stuff, and even if you were feeling disorientated and abandoned and all that sort of thing, you never went on about it. I think these days we're taking that stigma away a lot and saying to people, you're going to be much better if you actually get it out. You'll be returned to a higher level of functioning, more self-esteem, and sort of relationships will be in better nick if you say what's on your mind. In the military, we did it by abuse of alcohol and by hanging out with each other. This is in the regular army. And I say that quite unabashedly. In those days, you'd work hard, play hard. Playing hard meant 1,000 beers and with your mates, and you'd endlessly drone on about Vietnam. But what you're really doing is purging yourself. So a lot of us regular soldiers from those times probably had a little less on our mind, because after a while we thought, oh, not another Vietnam story, I don't want to hear it now. But, yeah, lots of nashos who just in the army one day and back out in the wider community the next, really did it tough, because it wasn't a popular war, and often people would say, I don't want to hear about your silly war stories. So that person was doubly abandoned, so to speak.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks for the question, Doug. Catherine, thank you.
Peter, a question for you. You were given the task of looking after the cyclone devastation and rebuilding North Queensland. What were some of the challenges, and what can you convey to us about the leadership that you showed in that period?
Yep. A practical challenge was you had so many willing hands and groups of people doing tremendously important work, but you had to try to stitch it all up. There's a tendency for people to just swamp in and just do things, and you can see friction and wasted effort, overlap of effort, so people get angry with each other, or divided effort where people are falling through the gaps. So you try to stitch that up. The other one was, of course, it's a human tragedy. You're looking at blown down houses and wrecked roads and power lines out and all that sort of thing, but it's only important because it relates to people. So you had to move every day to try to shine a light of hope on tomorrow for people by actually achieving improvement and talking about improvement. Do you know the major morale booster after Cyclone Larry was the remorseless, inexorable progress of Ergon and Energex, the big power suppliers, reconnecting, moving along. So the last thing people saw as they drove their car into their home with no power was they were passing the Energex team, which was one suburb up. Next day, they're a bit closer. That was the big morale boost. Somebody cares, somebody's working, the professionals are on the job. I've never seen people so happy to pay power bills. Energex, or was it Ergon? Gee, I think it's Ergon. Ergon, which was the North Queensland provider, won itself hearts everywhere. They were the real perceived corporate heroes of the recovery. So you shine this light of hope every day, and in 1,000 ways. My mantra was Far North Queensland will be bigger, brighter and better than ever before. We're not just bringing you back to where you were, taking the opportunity of you being wrecked. You're going to be even better when we finish.
Any other questions?
Peter, sorry, I'm over here.
Oh, over there.
Peter, you've been in a privileged position to see a lot of things happen in the world in the forms of defence. We've gone from the Cold War, the post-World War II era, Cold War, the risk of nuclear war, Vietnam War, eventually the collapse of the communist bloc, period of peace, apparent peace, followed by war on terror, rise of Islam, assertiveness of China, India starting to become a bit more assertive, America starting to rattle sabres towards China whilst we try to play a pleasant middle person role. What do you think is going to happen in the next 10, 15 years in a defence sense? What are the challenges we're going to face? What are the opportunities for greater peace? What are we going to see in the next 10 to 15 years?
I sort of worry about the Middle East a bit more, because the Americans are becoming rapidly energy independent. They've got huge reserves of shale, petrocarbons, gas and oil. And they will move rapidly to be much less reliant on the Middle East. And the moment they are no longer emotionally tied to Israel and economically hugely dependent on the Middle East, that'll rewrite the power equation. And the moment the Americans, who want to be the big boys on the block, but get cranky when it's always them that has to do something, and there will be this tendency to say, we're going to do a little less. So that will worry the hell out of China, which is hugely energy dependent on Middle East oil imports. And if the Americans sort of take the dead hand of the military out of the Middle East, and leave an Iranian bomb, a Pakistani bomb, an Indian bomb, Israeli bomb, and you know, now a new actor being maybe a worried China, then I think heaven alone knows how that will all settle. And that's the Middle East, which is the entrepot region of the world. And of course, I'm on the board of Qantas and we're just forming this great alliance with Emirates. It's a 10-year deal. No, it'll work out. You'll be safe.
You'll be safe.
No, it's just a worry in a geostrategic sense. But the only other one is we've got to continue to work assiduously with Indonesia. They're never going to be a threat to us, but their goodwill and reasonable behaviour between the two countries is hugely important. Because when we're all dead and gone and our kids are worried about their grandkids, Indonesia and Australia will still be relatively the same. Very powerful economy, Australia, small population, huge population, Indonesia, and with a vastly different culture. So they're the two things that I would be prescribing. Worry about the Middle East, not sure there's a lot we can do, and work very, very hard in our region. The China relationship, it'll take care of itself because they're a long way away. They're not a hegemonist power. They might try to be an economic hegemonist, by cancelling contracts and playing with the prices, but we'll still be their quarry for a long while. It's the relationship with Indonesia which is our bulwark into the future, and we should work on that.
Thank you. Another question.
Yes, thank you, Peter. As a developing leader in a bit younger times, did you have a mentor or people that you looked to inspire you to where you are today?
Yeah, I don't think we'd quite codified it, but I certainly had role models that I looked at and people who turned out to be mentors. It's interesting, you can end up with thousands of people, well, hundreds anyway, of people that you learn from. So you end up being a patchwork of behaviours that you have observed them doing. It might be just one tiny bit of the way they went about their business that you've absorbed and replicated the way you do it. And there's also lots of negative examples that you've seen, and you learn from those too. So you become an amalgam. I've never said there's one person. And I've learnt from private soldiers and very senior officers, and I've learnt really good things from private soldiers and terrible things from old generals. But equally, you can turn that around as well. So you should accept to be just a sponge for all of that. And mentoring, yeah, well, there's the halo effect. I mean, I was lucky enough to be recognised in my early service through combat, and from that point on there's a bit of a halo over your head, and it's great in the sense that, well, you become well known, and secondly, you have to live up. You have to live up to people's perceptions of you. If they think that you are good and you disappoint them, the only person more disappointed ought to be you, where you failed to live up to people's ordinary expectations. So I always seek the halo effect because it's very salutary on you to make sure you always are getting better every time and not just sort of coasting. And in that regard, I struggle more than most to live up to any halo effect that was created.
Thank you, Peter. The last piece of advice you can give to our emerging leaders in the room this evening.
You cross the threshold of leadership when you accept that you're responsible. It might be imposed on you or you might assume it. But just because it wasn't imposed and you assumed it doesn't mean you are less accountable, less responsible. If you feel that profoundly, it'll drive every other thing you do. I tell young officers, I commanded the military college for a while, I told these young trainee officers, one of the things they have to remember is that they might let the troops go at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And they might themselves have plans for the weekend. It doesn't mean that they've bundied off. You know, true leaders will be the person who wakes up at 11 o'clock at night, having gone to bed half an hour before. I've got to make a note because I've got to look after Sluggo's course that he's got to be up for on Monday. I have to do that. And it's this preoccupation, total absorption into the role, which is, I think, something you want the military officers to do. And I think back to what I might call the more episodic leadership, mostly in the civilian environment, and that is this sense that I'm accountable.
Thank you. And now you're a civilian. You're relaxed. You're on 11 boards. Yeah. You're still giving a little bit of advice and still showing a little bit of leadership. You're trim and terrific. Lost 36 kilos.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking fantastic. You're amongst friends here tonight. We've all shared your journey with you, so you can share another little piece of information with us. Who's going to be the next Governor-General?
Not me. No, I mean, I had the great good fortune to be the ADC to the Governor-General back in 1972. So I've been up close and personal and seen the sort of eminence and the characteristics and the demands on a Governor-General. And I've known a lot of them since, and they are enormously eminent people. And I'm a knockabout. I got to senior rank and I've had senior positions, but I'm a knockabout sort of a fellow. I'd like to think that I can relate to every other Australian, but not standing on a podium or being a Governor-General. I could nominate you a dozen people I think would be magnificent Governors-General, and I'm not on that list.
Peter, thank you very much for sharing all of your behind-the-scenes information. You might think that you can't be up there doing that, but I'm sure everyone in this room joins me in saying thank you, and we think that you are one of the great Australians, and we're delighted that you've taken the time to come to Ballarat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yep. Thank you. I'll give you that. Thank you. Thank you. Back on? Thank you. Thank you very much, and a very warm response, Peter. Thank you. Joe, also thank you to you and ACU for sponsoring this evening, for being able to tap into a mate and a friend and a colleague to be able to have Peter come along this evening. You've done a great job as MC, so everyone, would you please join with me in thanking ACU and Joe. Thanks, Joe.